Legendary teacher and long drive pioneer Mike Austin used to say that 93% of what we learn comes in through our eyes, and he was a big believer that every golfer was just one or two good mental images away from a huge amount of improvement. So in this video, I'd like to show you a few of my most favorite photos or mental images that I like to show my students. These images are to illustrate to those students a particular move, even to the point where that move might be exaggerated more than we actually need, because having that exaggerated mental image can be highly effective. So if you want to learn from the greats and get a few really good golf tips for your game on the way, then by all means stay tuned. Hey, this is Steve with HitItLonger.com. I continue on my journey to hit the ball longer and straighter than I ever have before. I'd love to show you how to do this too. Like and subscribe for more content like this. Okay, so here's a great photo of Johnny Miller, probably in the mid-70s or so. You gotta remember, Johnny Miller was probably one of the greatest ball strikers, especially for a period of time in the early 70s. His score of 63 at Oakmont to win the Open, of course. But in that time frame, you had a bunch of other super low rounds where you just put the ball within 10 feet of the hole a lot. So this image has a couple of great teaching points in it that I use with my students to illustrate things that they struggle with. Number one, look at his left foot. Notice how not only is it rolled to the outside, but the weight is predominantly on his heel, so much that his toes kind of stick up in the air. Now, this is an exaggeration, of course. I would not want to see most golfers roll their ankle over this much. However, for people who just don't get early extenders who shift into their toes, back shifters who leave most of their weight on the right foot, it's a great image to try for. You feel like you are doing it. It's the far end of the memory line from a lot of you out there. So when you're drilling or practicing or just imagining what you're trying to do, using an extreme at the far end of the number line, in this case, the position of the left foot, we know that great golfers, almost to a man, they position their weight centered on the outside of the left heel. Another great point from this photograph, another great mental image, I talk about the flapping of the right wrist or the flexion of the right wrist. You can clearly see Johnny Miller in this. His right wrist has been kind of flapped into flexion. You can see how it's bent. So he is not trying to hold an angle through impact. He is deliberately and actively throwing this club around the circle. And yet some of you still seem to think that throwing the club like this requires some kind of timing. But if it does, then, well, Johnny Miller somehow timed it incredibly, maybe the best of all time for a span of about 2 or 3 years. Now let's look at an image of Dustin Johnson. It's a little bit of an oldie too. This is, probably 10 years old. You can tell by the driver head, maybe 8-year-old photo. But it illustrates some great points that will help the ultra short hitter. Every short hitter that I've ever come across looks the opposite of what Dustin Johnson's doing in this photograph. The handle of the club, firstly, is stretched as far away from his sternum as he can possibly get it. Generally, short hitters, they tend to let this arc collapse, so the handle finishes up very close to their sternum. They have wrecked the circle, or the width of the circle. They've messed with the integrity of the circle. And watch how his right arm is fully extended to the point where his right shoulder is actually being pulled into play, enlarging the width of the circle by another 4 or 5 inches. Secondly, what I love about this photo is how the wrists are rehinged. Look at the angle between the right forearm and the club shaft. It's 90, possibly 100 or 110 degrees at this point. This is another thing that ultra short hitters just simply don't do. Typically what you'll find in someone who hits the ball very short is they will have narrowed the arc, the handle will be close to the sternum, and you actually would have a negative angle. So this would be what I'd call a positive angle of about 100 degrees. In other words, he has recocked the wrists. In short hitters, you'll find that they have a negative, so the shaft is on the other side of the right forearm. Now what this takes in order to get in this position is big time holding of the wrists and big time pulling of the handle through the impact zone, instead of slowing the handle down and throwing the head around the hands freely, throwing the head out into space as far as you can reach. And that's how you'll get this image. If you can practice this image, the folding of the left elbow, the extension of the right elbow out into space, the maintenance of a super wide arc, and the free rehinging of the wrists, some of you out there are destined to pick up 30, 40, maybe even 50 yards. Here's a great picture of Fred Couples, probably from about 1984. Remember the vests and the saddle shoes, kind of his trademark signature, as well as the sheepdog hair. You just got to love this look, this throwback. What I like to show people from this picture is a sense of sequence. So people who cast, they think they throw too early. This is a great video or a great photo to look at because, again, you can see, just like in the Miller photo, the weight is on the outside of the heel, but you can clearly see that the hips, especially your center of mass, which is, it's that one little square just above his waist in his vest, just below your belly button. It's your center of mass, and you can see in this picture that the center of mass is about 6 or 7 inches out in front of the ball, or in front of his chin, you might say. So this is really illustrating that the pivot, the action of the hips and the turning of the hips and torso have got to get into the lead and make a good, full, strong pivot out in front of probably the softest arms in golf history. And anybody else ever seen arms that looked, or a swing that looked more relaxed than Fred Couples? But what was going on underneath was this engine, this spine engine, this pivot engine that really drove his torso around and made his relaxed arms fly at a high rate of speed, giving him great multiplier of speed coming into the ball. And for those casters, scoopers, people who hit the ball fat, this is also the way that you are going to control your low point and locate it more up by the left instep, which will be in front of the ball every time, and you'll be able to hit the ball clean with a lot of compression. Let's do one more, and this one of Lee Trevino is definitely in my top 3 or 4 pictures all time that I show my students. Number one, it's hilarious that you've got a herd of cows behind the driving range, and you've got a driving range fence out there that I bet isn't much more than 225 yards, and yet it's probably tall enough and far enough that nobody could drive the ball over it back in this era because of the equipment. So this is a fantastic photo for many golfers, because a great percentage of golfers that come to me, they tend to stand up. They tend to have issues rotating. So we have early extension, we have very tall body at impact where you've stood up, and a lot of these golfers, they have really difficult time, no matter how hard they try, of rotating through. And so with the stand up, you get a poor hand path, you get poor low point control, you get poor face control. Well, this would be the opposite. This is one of these pictures I show people to show them the extreme at the other end of the number line. I say, look, if Lee Trevino is a 10 at all these things, he's a 10 at keeping butt depth, he's a 10 at rotation of the trunk, and he was one of the greatest, most accurate hitters of all time. So he had by far the most control over the angle of the club face at impact, probably because he had the least amount of club face rotation through the impact zone. It's very easy to control a club face that is rotating very mildly, if at all. So getting into this position requires the increase in butt depth through the impact zone. So if you've seen my channel and you've seen me use a chair behind my rear end or my students, then you know, see what this is for. If you are early extending, your butt is coming forward, leaving a gap off the chair. Trevino would probably be the other extreme. I would bet that if you put a chair behind him, he would lift it, 3, perhaps even 4 inches off the ground with his left hip and butt cheek. So this is the way you're going to get over to the left heel. This is why he's got so much forward bow through the impact zone and why the shaft appears to be so low. So like he and Ben Hogan, they looked a lot like this, and they had to bend their clubs a little bit flat in order to make up. Plus the fact that they were 5'7", 5'8", 5'9". This will also tend to give you the correct knee and right ankle action. And like I said, a lot of torso and hip rotation that's going to help the hand path swing on a more efficient arc. And that will help you get rid of some of that extra club face twist. And it will also help you accurately locate the low point of your swing where your divots are made in front of the ball, but sweeping in front of the ball to get the most compression, the greatest feel, and the best contact. All right, so there's some of the photos that I use most often with my students. I hope you got some insight into why I use them, and maybe you've picked out one that's a great image for what you're trying to do with your golf game. I've got a few more, so at some point I'll do a follow-up on this, and I'll show you some more of these great oldie photos that bring back some nostalgia from the past players, the past equipment, the past swings, and what they all have in common, but also the stark differences between golfer to golfer, and yet still they have enough in common in the most important areas so that they could win quite a few big golf tournaments. Hey, I'm Steve. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to check out my website, hititlonger.com, for more videos and articles that I think will help your golf game. Check out the Pro Shop. Like, subscribe, comment, and share this with somebody who is a lover of old historic photos too. And if I don't see you in the next one, I'll see you longer and straighter down the fairway. Everybody take good care.
You get into a position that you can really utilize your forces with the greatest amount.